Thank you everyone for your patience and watching this very important video. Dr. Wolke was gracious enough to grant me an interview to talk about his studies on sibling bullying and peer bullying. Bullying is an epidemic. It's considered normal, yet the mental health outcomes are alarming. Canada has 2/3 more bullying than other OECD countries or wealthy countries. 78% of people in Canada do not feel we're doing enough. According to Dr. Wolke, sibling bullying is serious, yet many of us don't talk about this taboo subject. I hope by listening you will see how victims of bullying deal with devastating mental health outcomes. The question is not what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. I volunteer my time to this cause. Being an advocate against bullying has been a large focus for the past few years, and recently I've stepped back to focus on my marketing and graphic design business. You can support my cause. I'd be grateful for any donations on my blog or the purchase of my book. And if that's not something you can do, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Peace. Which is
Okay,
yeah.
excellent.
Oh, well, so nice to. I'm sorry you don't see me, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
Written the book, My Courage to Tell, which was about sibling bullying, and thank you, yes. And when I started this whole process, I met with some psychologists who said, it's really important that people understand how psychological abuse has such long term effects. And so I think that was the focus because it's been years since I was bullied by my brother. It's been, I'm getting close to 60 here, but it affected myself and it affected my whole family. And when I started researching, there wasn't much stuff out there on sibling abuse and sibling bullying, and the only thing I could come across was more psychological abuse on children, adverse childhood experiences, but I didn't see anything on sibling bullying. So when I came across your studies, it was just, I can't tell you how that made me feel. It was so validating, and I'm so happy. And I know I speak for a lot of people that you're doing the studies on this, because I do believe it's kind of forgotten or just not talked about, and that type of stuff. So thank you so much for that first. And so I guess I'll start by asking you about the history of the studies from your university. And I guess it started with some peer bullying and led into the sibling bullying. So if you can just tell me a little bit about the history of that and why you started doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I was involved in a longitudinal study which we had set up, and it's the Bavarian longitudinal study, which is in Germany. I was living in England, went over to Germany. We set up this study of high-risk children. These are children who were born preterm, in particular, and were neonatal intensive care units.
Right.
And at that time, there was sort of evidence coming out that bullying might have negative effects, which is peer bullying, at school, by alveus, etc. And so I decided and got an extra grant to find out whether these children, who are usually a bit smaller, might have some disability, motor disability, from cerebral palsy to being more clumsy, uh, also have some learning disabilities and things. Would they actually be more frequently picked on? But we couldn't just follow up these children in a classroom. There would usually be one preterm in one classroom because they were all over Bavaria. So we had to follow up a subgroup of 80 of these children, and therefore interviewed all children in 80 classrooms, over 3,000 kids. And suddenly I was very surprised how much bullying there was. I mean, I wasn't aware of it. I mean, of course, everyone knows about it, has seen it. I'd seen it when I was young, but because I wasn't bullied myself
Yeah.
by peers, nor was I a bully. I wasn't aware how frequent it was.
Right.
And then we did the same study in Britain and compared, and we found that there were really quite big differences between Germany and Britain. And in
Hmm.
Germany, it was about half the amount of victimization than in Britain. And since then, other surveys have shown that the British were, for a time, the European champions in bullying. Yeah,
Wow.
so had relatively high rates, while they were lower in Germany. And then I started saying, okay, so cross-sectionally, we find that these kids have got more mental health problems, like
Yeah.
behavior problems, depression, anxiety. But it's a chicken egg problem. It might be that these children have these problems already, and then they get bullied because they have them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you need long-term studies. Basically, something which starts at birth or on pregnancy. So we had a study. We worked with the Alzbach study and implemented a lot of measures on bullying. And also then, when I was their deputy director of this study in Bristol at the University of Bristol, also something on sibling bullying, because it was amazing to me that nearly 90% of children grow up with a sibling, and we don't know anything about it, even though by the age we're 18, we will have spent more time with our siblings than we will have spent with our parents, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and with peers. So we implemented that as well, and we did the longitudinal studies. And also in the United States, we collaborated in North Carolina with the Great Smoky Mountain study, and both of these studies just produced strong long-term effects of peer bullying on self-harm, suicide attempts, and suicide, on depression, on
Mm.
anxiety disorder, eating disorders, etc. So,
Yeah.
and then we did the first study on sibling bullying, as far as I was aware at the time, that anyone had done, which we did in Israel.
Right.
And we did it with Palestinians and with Jewish Israelis, just for the reason that my PhD student was a Palestinian from Israel. But the second thing is they have got big families in
Yeah.
Israel, like 5 kids on average. And we found a huge amount of sibling bullying and a lot of behavior problems associated with and distress. And we also found that those who were sibling bullying were also much more likely involved in peer bullying. And so we then set up this study, but we had to wait for a number of years after we had asked them in the Bristol area in Britain, where we followed them now into adulthood, where we have looked what sibling bullying does.
Right. And it does.
It does, it does. It would come to that, I guess.
Oh, and it's just, it's nice to see a study that is showing it. There's so many people that I have connected with over the last 2 years, and it's just the stories I have heard are just heart-wrenching and heartbreaking to me. And, I never knew how prevalent it was until I wrote about it. And then it was like when people would read my story, they'd say, oh my God, like I don't feel so alone anymore. It's not just me. So,
No, it's not just you. I mean, it's
yeah,
actually it's actually more prevalent than peer bullying.
yeah.
And we will come that there's some, I mean, quite a few things are similar, but there are also some differences.
And that concerns me, I guess, when I hear things like that, because I think there's so much focus. Every bullying, everyone that's trying to prevent the bullying is going to the schools. They're going to,
Yeah.
and they're putting so much pressure on the teachers and all of the schools. And I keep thinking, yeah, but the bullies are going home. I started, 2 years ago, starting to say to it's nobody's fault. It's just that, you got to realize these guys or these girls or whoever they are going home, and then the person at home has to deal with them. It is not.
Well,
It
that's the
just
one
wasn't
thing.
being talked about. It was driving me crazy because I was trying to get people to understand. Yeah, they're at the school, but let's start looking a little deeper here. It just seemed bizarre to me that that's all the focus, and still is a lot of the focus. So hopefully we can get it to shift, and start, getting it to where it starts, you know? One of my first questions is a lot of people have asked me, what is the difference between sibling rivalry and sibling bullying? When I started to write the book, my first title was It's Not Sibling Rivalry, because I knew that it was much more than that. So, can you define what the difference is?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. The term rivalry comes actually from Iranian word, which is two rivers coming together.
Right.
Yeah, and what it actually means, rivalry is something which has been described actually in psychoanalytical literature in the 1940s, which used this term rivalry and introduced it. It's really a competition between two people. And we have got
Yes.
a lot of competition. I mean, we have
Right.
got competitions on TV, we have got competitions in sport, we have got play fighting, we do all of these competitions, but they are over, when
Yeah.
someone has won or not.
Right.
The difference to bullying is that it's actually done with the intention to harm someone
Right.
and to exert power and do this repeatedly. So
Yes.
it's not just a once-off competition, but it's happening every week, every day,
Every day.
repeatedly, and
Mm-hmm.
it's done with the intention to dominate someone else and to gain power and have
Exactly.
access to more resources.
Yeah. There's the victim and then there's the bully. It's
Yeah,
not,
but
you
it's
know,
not as black and white as that. There are also in sibling bullying, in particular, there are quite a few bully victims.
right.
So that at the one time they bully the sibling, but then they get victimized by the sibling as well. So
Right.
that they're both involved in it, but repeatedly and with the intention the other one to hurt.
Yeah.
So the other thing would be that you do like games and things and you compete and I'm better than you, but it's not. It's just to find out your strengths and what you can do and how you compare and so on, rather than wanting someone to hurt. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's rivalry.
Right. Right. So you've talked about pure bully, bully victim, and victims. What can you define what those are?
Yeah, pure bullying, and it's very important because a lot of people just, particularly in the North American literature, they have got like victimization scales and they have got perpetration scales. So what it basically means, you tot up of how much someone gets victimized. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but the point is that perpetration and victimization are correlated with each other. There are a number of kids who do both. So a pure bully is someone who does hurt someone else, whether that's verbally, relationally, or physically, like actually beating them, but never becomes a victim themselves.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. And
Yes.
then you have got the victims who are exactly, they become the victims of this psychological, verbal, I mean,
Yeah.
sort of, or direct bullying, physical bullying, but never fight back or victimize someone else. And the bully victims are those who are basically get victimized but fight back. But they're
Mm.
really very unsuccessful in this. And
Hmm.
so we have actually found, when we look in the long term of who is doing worse in their outcome, is actually these defeated victims who try to fight back, but it's unsuccessful.
Oh,
So
interesting.
they're bully victims, and they do the worst in their mental health
Oh my goodness. That is
because
interesting.
they have tried, but it didn't make
It
any
didn't
difference.
make a
So they
difference.
can't really affect the environment very much.
Yeah.
And these are the kids. If you look at peer bullying, they're very often the kids who fly off the handle very easy, who get angry. Everyone knows them, but they laugh about them, because
Mm-hmm.
they have that influence.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know the term bullied victim. I just, I was one of the victims that did not fight back.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that the bully victim doesn't do as well. I mean, it's does that go into if you tell a parent and they do nothing, like if you complain to a parent that so and so is bullying me, would that be in there somewhere? In
Yeah,
terms
I
of
mean, with peer bullying, we know that about 30 to 40% of the kids don't disclose to their parents. And it's actually two groups of children who are not doing this. It's the one who basically say, if I say it, they just say, well, then fight back or stand up for yourself, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
that. Or the other ones are helicopter parents, who are overprotective, where the children say, which is a form of abuse too, because the children tell us that all hell breaks loose when they tell their parents, because they will phone
Yeah.
the perpetrator, they will phone the schoolmaster, they will phone the teacher. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
will want to talk to everyone. They want to have a school conference about it. This, and so on. And the kids tell us, when my parents are through, everyone in the school knows that
Yeah.
I'm bullied. Yeah,
Right. Yes.
and so in the at home, we don't know. There in the sibling bullying, we didn't ask that question because it would be interesting of how many disclose to the
Yeah.
parents. Yeah,
Yeah.
to tell them. And presumably a lot of them, I mean, certainly from experiences when we have talked to them that they have tried, but I think, like in your case, your parents just ignored it or said, well, you just get on, can't be that bad or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and I tried to talk a lot about that in my book because when I look at the generational, like what happened with my father, he was a huge bully to his siblings. And so, I really didn't think about it until later on when all this blew up, that my father would laugh at me when I was bullied. He thought it was a joke. And
Yeah.
so, and my mother didn't have a voice, and so I had, nobody to help. And
Yeah.
we had immigrated from Scotland, and there was just nobody around that could help me. Do you think this is generational? Because I look at the generations, and I look at what happened to my mother, and I look at what happened to my father, and why it was acceptable. Like this terrible bullying that I got was not a big deal and completely ignored, even when I was shutting down and hiding in my closet and unable to speak. All these things that are clear signs to parents, just completely ignored. It's just kids will be kids. I mean, we've got to get over this kids are resilient, kids will be kids type of stuff.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that there is a factor because a lot of things we didn't know. I mean, if you think about the 1970s and 80s was a revelation of all the sexual abuse that took place
Yeah.
on children. I mean, it was
Mm,
first completely ignored, then it went completely overboard. It was seen everywhere. Yeah, that
mm,
everyone got worried to be at all in touch, which very often happens. Then that you become the pendulum can swing too far. Yeah,
yes.
with worry about it, that you don't have normal relationships anymore, and so on. So I think there's clearly a stronger awareness of school bullying because a lot of schools were made to have policies on it and so on. But we also know that they have been very ineffective because just writing it down
Hmm.
doesn't mean anything is done about it. It just
Yeah.
looks good on paper.
Yeah.
It's like procedures. It's much more important is what you do rather than what you write or say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's basically that's where the proof is in the pudding, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah.
And I think with sibling bullying, we're only just a few people who are doing research on this, which is absolutely amazing. Because if you think about it, that I mean, it's not a rare thing. I mean, it's 90% of people grow up with siblings.
Yes.
They are such an important socialization force. But the
Yes.
interesting thing is, in humanity, which I found with other areas which we have researched, like let's say about crying and sleeping problems in infants, is if you do something which is very extraordinary, like you do research, let's pick a group, not that they are not important, like autism or something, which is out of our normal experience, but is actually relatively small percentage of the population. There is a lot of interest in this because it's so different. But if you do some research about something which everyone experiences,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not as sexy. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not see,
Yeah.
and also everyone thinks that they can say something about it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I find that it's almost, well, it's normal. That's what I get. Well, I went out for a little party. There was about six of us women, who all just sat around, and I was telling them that I had written a book about my bullying brother, and they all kind of giggled, and then we all kind of shared our stories, and it seemed to me it was pretty prevalent. I heard just the worst stories. It's like, well, man, is this just everyone? Like, oh my goodness. And some were worse than others, some of the stuff. I think we just consider it, oh, that's normal, and it's not normal.
Yes, but I always use one particular example. So by the age of 50, 20% of men and about 40% of women will have had a fracture, yeah,
Yes.
broken a bone.
Right.
So if you look at percentages of bullying, like 20% on sibling bullying, 30%, yeah, if
Yeah.
we take these figures, they are equivalent, aren't they? They're very normal. If you
Yeah.
say that's normal, so it's normal. But if it's normal, why do we have fracture clinics?
Yeah.
Why do we put a cast on?
Right.
Why do we pin the bones?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we supply treatment? If we think about physical things being as normal as psychological effects, then we shouldn't do that. We should just say, look, honestly, it happens to so many people. I mean, just keep on hobbling on,
Yeah.
and get through life. Yeah, I mean that's what we do. Yeah, and it's interesting that we make a very big difference about the effects which we see
Yeah.
immediately, which are the physical effects, versus psychological.
Yeah.
But actually, the psychological can do a lot of harm because, I mean, if you actually have got a bone and you do this, it doesn't have an effect on all of your other relationships, of how you deal with other stresses, how you do your work, and so on. They
Absolutely.
do have an effect. So I don't think there's any excuse not to do about it, about anything, if we think it's normal. I
Yeah.
mean, if you will think, I mean, we could say this about the coronavirus. If up to 80% are infected, we shouldn't do anything about it because it's normal.
Mm, exactly.
What we found is that for the bully victims, they have got much more problems later on. They have got with aggression, with substance abuse, building poor relationships and so on.
Right.
But the pure bullies who get away with it and never become victims themselves. In peer bullying, we know very clearly that they are often seen as the cool kids. I mean, kids you should know, you actually
Hmm.
associate with,
They're
you have
rewarded.
groups.
They're
You,
rewarded for
yeah,
being, yeah.
yes, exactly, because they get resources, people want to be with them, and actually having this callousness with them because they don't see the pain the victims go through is something which becomes then also rewarded in some other settings. So they may be, some people have compared it to it, they might be the bankers of the future
Yeah.
or the CEO of companies, or they even run countries. In the same way, I mean,
Right.
they exclude people, they call them names,
Mm-hmm.
put them down,
Yeah.
uh, and it's still rewarded.
Yeah, that's terrible. It just breaks my heart to see it.
The first important finding is if you're a bully at home, yeah, a
Right.
sibling bully, yeah,
Yes.
you're three times more likely also to be a bully at school. So you
Right.
basically learn certain behaviors that you get away with it with your sibling, that you try the same with your peers. Yeah, so
Yes.
there's a response that has been reinforced. If you're a victim at home, you're about twice as likely to also become a victim at school.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's,
So
yes.
there's really is a situation. And then of course the situation can occur that you're a victim at home and you go to school, you're a victim there as well. So you have got 24 hours, 7 days a week,
Yeah.
where you have no escape.
No
Yeah,
escape.
apart from when you're outside playing somewhere or whatever and you don't know anyone. But otherwise you have no escape from being picked on.
It's
So
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I was, you're talking to a person who experienced that very thing where, I had the sibling bully and then I had to go to school and there they were picking on me at school. So it was quite traumatic.
Yes, and I mean, because it really doesn't give you any trust in people anymore, because everywhere where you go, you have to be worried about that you will be attacked or excluded, and so on. So the situation is, we looked for the first time, that was in 2014, the first publication of a longitudinal study which we conducted, where we looked at sibling bullying at 12 years, to look at depression and anxiety and self-harm at 18 years. And then last year we had looked further till 24 years of age. The findings are the same. Sibling bullying more than doubles the risk of self-harming or
Hmm.
attempted suicide,
Hmm.
and increases the risk of depression. I mean, doubles the risk, even if you control for problems which were before there, parenting behavior or peer bullying. Yeah,
Hmm.
so you or even control for the peer bullying. This is just as simple as sibling bullying. But if you're sibling bullied and you're bullied at school,
Yeah.
it again doubles this. So you're
Nice.
3 to 4 times more likely to have these poor mental health outcomes, because you have no escape.
No escape. Nope.
Yeah.
Terrible. Yeah, I mean that's pretty important stuff, and it can't be ignored. It just can't. It's we've got to get the word out there how important this is. And what did you find in terms of cyberbullying? Was that part of the study as well? Because
Uh, well, we have looked in a different study. We have looked at cyberbullying in a more
right?
recent study, because if we have followed them up now to adulthood, the problem was that there was not that much of social media around at the time.
Yeah, right.
So we did a recent study in Britain with some 2,800 children, I mean adolescents between 11 and 16 years of age. And we looked at cyberbullying. And the most interesting finding, and this came out then 2 months later as well, another study in Britain with 110,000 children, and a study in the United States, which actually showed, I mean, the title of our article was Cyberbullying, a storm in the teacup, question mark. Because the major thing is, cyberbullying is important, and it has got can have ill effects.
Mm-hmm.
But what we found is that between 85 and 90% of all children who are cyberbullied are also traditionally bullied.
Right.
So, because bullying is about power
Mm-hmm.
and it's about dominating, so you don't write to someone in China where you can't see that they're, for example, suffering. Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Right.
that
Yeah.
they're suffering, because the whole point is about see them suffering, that the others around can see that too,
Yeah.
because it means that you have a higher status and you're stronger, and the others can join in, which ferments your better relationship with that group.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
with the helpers. So it's nearly all of the cyberbullying is directed at children they know at school.
Yeah.
And they go to school with, they write it, and then everyone comes in and they can laugh about it when they walk in, because something has been written and they
Yeah.
have all shared it, and so
Yeah.
on. So cyberbullying is not like computer scientists make up this completely new phenomenon and the journalists hyping this up. But it's just, I mean, if you used to have a bow and arrow, and now you have got a machine gun, why not use the machine gun as well?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's just another tool
Mm-hmm.
with the same. So actually, the people who do it, uh, their characteristics, who are the bullies, and so on, is all very similar to traditional bullying. There's one difference: you can have revenge bullying
Hmm.
in online, if you're not, because you're anonymous. You couldn't do this if you do face someone directly. but you find slightly more victims who try to get back at someone by doing anonymously do it online.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What did you find about gender? Did you find that did you find a difference in male, female bullies, victims, that type of thing?
Well, there is usually, I mean, in peer bullying, you find the differences usually that more girls report being bullied
Mm,
and more boys say that they are involved as perpetrators. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
But then, if you actually look in more detail of the type of bullying that's done, like for example, if you do physical bullying, it's more boys.
Yeah.
But if you take like verbal bullying, but in particular relational bullying, like you can't come to my party,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
or play tricks on, like we're doing a fancy dress party, but only
Yeah.
one person turns up in fancy dress. Those types of social exclusion, yeah,
Yeah.
which is taking place. That's slightly more done by girls
Right.
than by boys.
Then
So the
boys.
sex differences there are some, but they're not as large.
Mm,
Within the family, if we look at sibling bullying, and I think this is now important to make the difference with peer bullying and sibling bullying, we try to understand how does sibling bullying come about. With peer bullying, we know it's all about social resources. Like, for example, pure bullies, it starts getting a little bit more in early adolescence again. They get more dates, they have got more success. It means you get higher in the hierarchy within the class, you get a higher status, you're a cool kid, and therefore you get more access to resources. Yeah, social resources, partnerships and so on. But how is it in sibling bullying? And
right.
in sibling bullying is the interesting thing. It's very evolutionary. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's really, that's it's like, I mean, we call it trouble in the nest. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because in birds, you find if the bird is born, I mean, comes out of the egg first, and the biggest one tries to shove the other birds out of the nest
Mm-hmm.
because it will get more food. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, early on. And this actually what we found. We find that very clearly firstborns are 3 times more likely to be the bullies
Yeah.
than later borns
Right.
because they start off with 100% of the attention by the parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what now happens is that they're fighting off to lose to 50%. Yeah, they
Right.
cannot accept it.
Yeah.
And it's a very general psychological principle. If I would offer you 10% of a salary increase, yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then you would be pretty happy.
Yeah.
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 You would be about 3 or 4 times as unhappy if I say I will cut your salary by 10%.
Right.
So we are much more sensitive to losses
Mm-hmm.
than to gains. Yeah.
Right.
And so they are fighting to basically keeping the 100% attention. Yeah,
Yes.
from early on. The second thing is evolution is important. The larger the family, the more siblings, the more bullying is likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to share resources even with more hungry siblings, so to speak. Yeah, and
Yeah.
then we find the situation that if the firstborn is a male, then you do find slightly more. You find more sibling bullying than if the first one is a girl, who might show more caring towards the second one. So the
Yes.
combination of having a boy first, being firstborn, having a larger family, that is a brew to get more bullying.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I didn't have a chance. I had a brother who was 3 years older who actually went to live with grandma uh, and was coming home on weekends. But when I was born, he came back, full
Okay.
time. So, he had two losses. He had the loss of his grandparents, and then he
Yeah.
had, so I mean, I could see how that had influenced him because the bullying started when I was a baby.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
anyways, it isn't, I don't want to make this all about me, but I look at it and it just completely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
as far as social status of the family, is there a difference? If does it matter in terms of bullying? Is there a difference with the social status of families?
Well, the interesting thing is, and we found this now in three different samples, is it makes very little difference at
Yeah,
all.
right.
Uh, because the social class doesn't matter that much because it's a conflict within families. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're poor, you might fight for the bread, yeah,
Yeah,
which is there. If
yeah.
you're wealthy, you fight for the new iPhone, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
or the new tablet or whatever it is. So it's just what is important within that family. That's what you fight for. So social class, we didn't find much of a difference at all. We were also surprised it didn't make much difference whether you were a single parent household or not.
Right.
And there wasn't, because people would think there would be a big difference or something, but there wasn't also with reconstituted families.
Mm-hmm.
So you find with those who have remarried and have children from
Mm.
different fathers or mothers,
Yeah.
yeah,
Makes it even more complicated, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah,
With sibling bullying, it's a long term, such a long relationship. I think,
yeah,
you know, I haven't spoken to my brother in, I think, 5 or 6 years, and it was because an aunt died. And that's how it all started. And that whole family dynamic was all stirred up again with a death. And I think people have to understand that this is, even though you're with that person as a child or teens or whatever, there will be again another meeting later on when there's, a death in the family, or, parents get ill. Like this relationship is a really long time.
yeah. It's actually the longest relationship we have with anyone. Usually,
Yeah.
is with your sibling. And what happens is they're very clear live sort of movements with most people. Of course, individuals, families are different, yeah.
Yeah.
But in general, what happens is that when you're young, like before puberty and down, siblings spend quite a lot of time together, particularly if there's more than one and so on, because you do play together, yeah,
Mm,
and
mm-hmm.
parents leave them together, yeah, and you
Mm-hmm.
do things, and a lot of time spent together also breeds contempt. Yeah,
Yes.
just like little things annoy you and so on. Because you know someone so well, but you also know, of course, the points with the buttons to
Yeah.
press.
They
Yeah,
they know how to push your buttons.
yeah.
Yep.
So then you get into adolescence, then very often siblings sort of want to be individuals. They want to find their own relationships and so on. And they might spend more time apart. And then very often they come more often together again because they're family gatherings. They might have their own children. You're now uncle or aunt to the kids, of
Mm-hmm.
your siblings, so that there are more gatherings that you're together. And then, as you said, as the parents get older, there need to be very often plans of care. Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
how do we go about it? Finances are involved, and then of course inheritance can become a very big problem. Again,
Absolutely.
where someone falls out or
Mm-hmm.
they can't deal with it properly, where all of these relationships are put together. I mean, it's like you would do an experiment where you bring people together and then just then you say, well, we play here for very low stakes, like for $1, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or you say, now you have to put in $100,000.
Right.
So everything that's in the relationship becomes quite
Yeah.
uh, quite focused then, because the
Yeah.
losses are large.
Right. Sibling bullying is a taboo, and no, I guess parents don't want to talk about it either. There's, in terms of what happened to me at 2 years old, I was in the hospital, and I was alone with my brother, and I still to this day don't know what happened. But I had my leg broken in 4 or 5 places, and it was told to me that I was attacked by a German Shepherd, which, now I look back and go, but where were the bite marks? Where were the scratch marks? Like something terrible happened. And it was never really talked about, and still nobody really wants to talk about it. It's a big.
No, I think they're really. I mean, it has been described. They're really big secrets. I mean, the first thing is no one goes out and says, "I really do have problems between my two, or my three kids." Yeah, I mean, you
Yeah,
meet them in the evening and say, "I really want to talk about." They beat the hell out of each other, and they do this, and they're crying and there's blood flowing and so on. So people don't do this because it actually is seen as a big failure.
yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah.
second thing is that you don't talk about it to professionals because the big worry about social services. Yeah,
Mm,
a lot of lies. But of course, it means exactly the same with abuse victims. They're told, yeah, well, you can't tell the doctor, that your brother pushed you down the stairs or
yeah,
out of the top of the bunk bed or whatever. It
yeah.
was just an accident. You fell or something. Yeah.
Right.
So you really are sworn into the family
Into the
secret.
family secrets, exactly,
Yeah.
which I
So
wanted to
they,
talk about. I
yeah,
guess this is what happened. The family situation blew up, and I wanted to talk about it, and my mother did not. And she completely stopped talking to me. That's how strong it is with the family,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to make, I guess, a lot of people have to make decisions. Am I going to want to talk about this or not? I don't think secrets are very good for people who are victims. And from what I'm learning, there's long-term consequences on mental health and physical health about that.
Yeah.
So, and anyways, I just wanted to bring that up. The other thing, most importantly, of course, is what do you suggest parents need to know about sibling bullying, and how do they know it's happening, and what do you suggest parents do?
I think the most important thing is, and this is true for all relationships, yeah? I mean, just
Mm-hmm.
think about whether it's with your siblings. I mean, most people always talk about parent relationship with your parents, but it's true with the parents, it's true with your sibling, it's true for peers, and it's true with your partner, your romantic partner, yeah?
Yes.
The most important thing is that you have to keep channels of communications open
Yes.
and that you communicate with each other. And
Absolutely.
if problems come up, that you can actually talk about it. And too often we go in the situation that we just avoid talking about it because
Mm,
someone reacts like this and so on. So if you don't have the communication open, yeah,
yeah.
it's also true for companies and so on, then things fall down because
Yes.
miscommunicated or they're misunderstood and you can't talk you can't talk about it. So
Yeah.
that's the first thing. The second thing is that of course there's an imbalance of power between an older child and a younger child at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, and it's very normal that when the kid comes, you have to just see that they experience a loss.
Yeah.
Everyone is looking at the cute new baby, yeah,
Yeah.
and everyone talks to mum about, and mum is breastfeeding, yeah. She
Mm-hmm.
spends now all the time with this baby, yeah, even at night time gets up for this baby and not for me,
Yeah.
yeah. So actually, there's a very clear loss, and so it's very important to manage this at the beginning. So, for example, I've got two kids. When the second was born, my son came into the clinic, and he always wanted to have a rubbish collector lorry from Playmobil, yeah.
Yeah.
And so his sister had brought it. I mean, for the first 2 weeks, she was the best thing on earth. I mean, it didn't last, yeah, but it
Yeah.
was the first 2 weeks was a good way to start off with that. And then it was very important to involve them in care rather than push them away. Yeah,
Yeah.
because they might be a little bit too rough at the beginning. They
Yeah.
try this, so actually to involve them and to see that this is not a threat, is not undermining you. Yeah,
Right.
is not the jealousy you have. Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, in a way, it's someone described. I try to describe this to people how it must feel for the first child. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so can you imagine one day let's say your husband comes home,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and has decided, do you know, I think we should have another woman in the house. Yeah,
Divorce.
yeah. No, 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 no. No,
Yeah.
let's have another woman in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about it. It's just another woman who comes in the house. Yeah. So why don't I bring her along and she lives with us?
Right.
Yeah. And then you come and he brings this other woman along and so on. And you are now asked to accept this from
Mm-hmm.
day one without being jealous, without being angry, and so
Mm-hmm.
on. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the situation for
Yeah.
a firstborn. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
That something comes out. So it's very important to manage that situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
try.
absolutely. And what would you say to parents if they suspect bullying is going on, if they do suspect something is going on? What would you say to parents?
Well, the first thing is a lot of the bullying is behind closed doors. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually do spend more time with them that you can actually see them. Yeah.
Right.
The second
Yes.
thing is if you see it in front of them, then you have to be like with everything in life, you have to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you're tired and you don't let them just get on and fight and cry
Yeah.
and so on. Yeah. The next time you're okay, then you make a big fuss. It's very important to consistent to intervene. Yeah.
Right.
The
Yes.
third thing is
Absolutely.
to be very clear, to be fair about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because it can be that also younger ones can always manipulate, that the older one, and I'm poor and so on, that can happen.
Yeah.
So it's very important to be fair and to make clear what they're actually fighting about, to understand what their reasoning is. Yeah.
Right.
Like for
Yes.
example, there was one sibling pair who were completely fighting about there was one orange, yeah, and the one wanted to bake and the other one wanted to make juice.
Mm-hmm.
And so the parents said, just, yeah, everyone gets a half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they
Mm-hmm.
were still fighting about it's not enough for my juice. So sometimes the solution is quite different. Well, for the cake, you only need the skin.
Yeah.
But for the juice, you can have the whole orange. You don't need it for the cake.
Yeah.
So both could have had what they wanted
Yep.
if one would have asked them about it, what
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
really wanted
Yeah.
to do.
So just
Yeah.
being aware, just being
Yeah.
aware
So,
is
so
so
that's
important.
important. And to really discuss if
Mm-hmm.
there, for example, situation of how you could solve it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, rather
Yes.
than telling and just getting angry and so on, is actually to take them down and say, so okay, he annoys you when others come along and walks through your blocks and so on and throws them down. So how could we do them? Could you build them somewhere else, for
Yeah.
example? Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
What could we do to take him? Okay, we could also do something that we take him out that you've got time on your own to play on that, yeah, and
Yeah.
so on. So it's finding
It's
solutions
finding
and
solutions.
understanding what it is that leads to the anger.
Right. And a big taboo subject that I did want to bring up since I have connected with so many people who were sexually
Yeah.
abused by their sibling. Is there going to be any studies on this? Because I know it's a taboo subject, but something that has crossed my path, I guess, since I started this. People telling me the stories about it, and I thought I'd bring it up.
Yes, I mean we have thought about. I mean we also did an analysis to look at to ask about abuse. But there are two important things. If you do studies, longitudinal studies, where you see people again, rather than doing an anonymous online survey, you have got an ethical command, really, that you can't hear this and not do anything about it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have
Mm-hmm.
to report it to social services or
Right.
intervene. You
Uh,
can't let someone go on to sexually abuse and so on. But I've got a plan actually. In fact, just about a few months ago, we have talked about it a long time ago of how we could do it, but to work together with lines, self-help lines, where you can phone up if you have been sexually abused,
mm-hmm.
and actually to record how many were abused by their siblings compared to their father, stepfather, or mother. Yeah.
Right. Yes.
To get an idea. And I spoke to someone on the line and I said, well, they get this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That it
Yeah.
was that a sibling was the abuser. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I was quite
but we don't know.
surprised.
But we don't know the percentage of all of those who are abused that it is a sibling. I mean, we know that sexual abuse is 1 in 4 women will have experienced it, and 1 in 6 men. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my personal opinion on that is it's higher. I there was just a recent documentary I watched uh, about sexual abuse, and it was much higher, although it's not reported as such. So I really do think we've got to get some more information on that.
Yes, and it's not, as far as I know, out there.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have to do an anonymous survey
Yes,
to
you do.
find to find out, because then you can't intervene because you
Yeah,
don't know the people.
right.
So to get an honest opinion, or you would have to work with helplines. In our longitudinal studies, if we would ask it, we then would
Have to
have,
just, yeah,
for ethical reasons, we would have to intervene.
got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
Uh,
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all my questions. Is there anything else I might have missed?
No, I think we had a very thorough discussion on this. In general, I think there's one thing which we have missed, because you ask about the parents asking about it.
Yes.
But you see, one of the things is we did recently a survey about students' mental health, because there has been an increase over the years, yeah, in problems.
Yes. Yes.
And the 2 things which we found that were related to having mental health at university, because people talk about, has it to do with the academic pressure? Does it have to do that they don't have a close enough relationship to tutors, and so on? The 2 biggest factors that we found was that those who have mental health problems already had them before they came to university. But the
Mm.
second thing is that they have been bullied before they
Mm-hmm.
came to university.
Mm-hmm.
So, a very important thing is, if a child comes with symptoms, whether they're psychological symptoms or physical symptoms, repeated headaches, migraines, belly aches, wants to stay off school, yeah, or
Yes.
wants to go away, so that stay at home because the sibling is at school and they are not, yeah,
Yeah.
for example, is very important that general practitioners, pediatricians, but also mental health professionals ask not just about the relationship with the parents, but ask about peer relationships, and in particular also sibling relationships. It's hardly ever, when we analyze like history taking, is
Mm-hmm.
not being asked about.
Right.
And this can be related to why they get referred. So we have tried to work together with general practitioners to ask this question,
Mm-hmm.
and then see, because they might be barking up the wrong tree.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very good if any mental health practitioner can bring up that subject, and I guess my concern is, will children tell? Because sometimes
Uh,
there's that, we don't talk about this. So,
Well, it's interesting. We did with 100 young people. We did actually ask, would it, if you would come to a GP and ask, and they said very clearly, 85% said yes,
oh,
I would talk about it, but only if my parents are not present.
correct. Right. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Oh, my goodness. Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time, and really appreciate what you're doing. Um,
Okay,
yeah, it's all good stuff.
thank you. And let me know when you have got this recording somewhere online, then I might use it also for students.
Great. Will do.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.